Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use, tips a balance in favor of fair use. Operation Snow White. The print is going to be too small for me to scroll for you guys. I'm going to be reading this on my tablet, so just to let you know. And this is from Wikipedia. And as you know, Scientology often infiltrates Wikipedia and the other one, Wilkipedia. Operation Snow White was a criminal conspiracy by the Church of Scientology during the 1970s to purge unfavorable records about Scientology and its founder, L. Ron Hubbard. This project included a series of infiltrations into and thefts from 136 government agencies, foreign embassies and consulates, as well as private organizations critical of Scientology, carried out by church members in more than 30 countries. It was one of the largest infiltrations of the United States government in history, with up to 5,000 covert agents. This operation also exposed the Scientology plot, Operation Freakout, because Operation Snow White was the case that initiated the U.S. government's investigation of the church. Under this program, Scientology operatives committed infiltration, wiretapping, and theft of thousands of documents in government offices, most notably those of the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. 11 highly placed church executives, including Mary Sue Hubbard, third wife of founder L. Ron Hubbard, and second in command of the organization, pleaded guilty and were convicted in federal court of obstructing justice, burglary of government offices, and theft of documents and government property. It's amazing what you can do with money, isn't it? The case was United States versus Mary Sue Hubbard et al. 493 F as in Frank at Supposition 209 DDC 1979. Background. As early as 1960, L. Ron Hubbard had proposed that Scientologists should infiltrate government departments by taking secretarial, bodyguard, or other jobs. In the early 1970s, the Church of Scientology was increasingly scrutinized, no way, by U.S. federal agencies. Having already been raided by the Food and Drug Administration in 1963, the Internal Revenue Service claimed the church owed millions of dollars in taxes, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, sent agents into the organization. The church's response involved a publicity campaign, propaganda, extensive litigation against the IRS, and a program of infiltration of agency offices. I personally have a lot of questions about this stuff. I'm not going to go there on the internet. The specific branch of Scientology responsible for Operation Snow White was the Guardian's office. Oh, wasn't Mike Rinder in the Guardian's office? Anybody? Marty Rathburn? Created in 1966 by L. Ron Hubbard, the purpose of the Guardian's office was to protect the interests of Scientology. At the time of Operation Snow White, the Guardian's Office had its worldwide headquarters, Guardian's Office WW, located at St. Hill Manor in England. Headquarters in the United States, Guardian's Office were in Los Angeles, California, though smaller offices existed in Washington, D.C., Guardian's Office, D.C., and other cities throughout the United States. Each Guardian office consisted of 5 bureaus. One such bureau was the Information Bureau, which oversaw the infiltration of the government. L. Ron Hubbard oversaw the Guardian's office, though it was Mary Sue Hubbard, the wife, who held the title Commodore Staff Guardian. I've read and heard accounts that she wasn't a very nice person, but I don't know that for sure. Several years later, in 1973, the Guardian's office began a massive infiltration of governments around the world. Though the primary target of the operation was the United States. Worried about Scientology's long-term reputation, the Guardian's office decided to infiltrate Interpol to obtain documents related to Scientology, as well as those connecting L. Ron Hubbard to criminal activity. Jane Kernber handed this duty to Henning Helt and his staff. Around this time, L. Ron Hubbard himself wrote Guardian Order 732, which called for the removal and correction of erroneous Scientology files. It is here that Operation Snow White has its origins. Though the order called for this to be achieved by legal means, this would quickly change. Hubbard himself would later be named by federal prosecutors as an unindicted co-conspirator for his part in the operation. He never went to jail, though. Though extensive records of his involvement exist, many Scientologists claim his directives were misinterpreted by his followers. Well, that's a great out, isn't it? Operation Snow White would be further refined by Guardian Order 1361, addressed from Jane Kernber to Helt, Duke, Snyder, and Richard Weingard. Guardian's Office 1361 called for, among other things, an infiltration of the Los Angeles and London offices of the IRS and the Department of Justice. While the order was specific to the IRS, the Guardian's office was soon recruiting their own field agents to infiltrate other governmental offices, including the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, the U.S. Coast Guard Intelligence Service, and the National Institute of Mental Health, among others, as well as the American Medical Association. The program called for rewards to be given for successful missions carried out by Scientologists. I would love to know what those rewards were. One of the sentencing's memoranda in the case also noted that, contrary to what the defendants claimed, the programs planned by the Guardian's office were not restricted to trying to remove false reports, but included plans to plant false information. For instance, planting false records about a cat with a pedigree name into U.S. security agency computers so that later the creature holds a press conference and photographic story results. The purpose of Operation Cat was to hold up the American security to ridicule, as outlined in the GO by LRH. The start of 1974 saw Michael Meisner appointed Assistant Guardian for Information in the District of Columbia. Meisner's responsibilities included the implementation of all information bureau orders, programs, and projects within the D.C. area. Meisner's supervisor at the time was Duke Snyder, the Assistant Guardian for D.C., or AGDC. This was the highest position in Washington GO office. In July 1974, Meisner was ordered by Duke Snyder to implement the previously written plan to obtain Interpol documents, which were then located in the U.S. Department of the Treasury. Meisner had more to do than just this, though as by August, he was also taking directions from Cindy Raymond, the GO's collections officer for the U.S., who ordered Meisner to assist her in finding a loyal Scientologist agent to gain employment at the IRS headquarters in Washington, D.C. This employee was to steal all documents dealing with Scientology, especially those involving current litigation by Scientology against the government. Meisner discussed this with Raymond for a period of a month before interviewing various Scientologists, with no luck. A month after the order had been given, Raymond informed Meisner that she had selected Gerald Bennett Wolfe. Implementation. The GO's actual infiltration of the government likely began when Gerald Wolfe and Michael Meisner were able to gain employment at the IRS as clerk typists. Under direction of the Guardian office, Wolfe monitored files on tax-exempt organizations and, when requested, illegally made copies for Scientology. Meisner supervised both Wolfe and the Information Bureau section in D.C. and reported to the GO's Deputy Guardian for information in the U.S. In November 1974, Operation Snow White took an unsuspected turn for the GO when they received word that the IRS would be conducting a meeting on Scientology's tax-exempt status. In response, the church sent a spy to bug the room. On the morning of November 1st, the day before the meeting, a GO agent, Herman, broke into the conference room and plugged the device into an electrical outlet. This device, in turn, then transmitted a signal on an FM frequency, which was picked up and recorded by Scientologists sitting in a car in the parking lot of the Smithsonian, which faced the office. After the meeting, Herman removed the device, and the tape recording of the meeting was sent to Los Angeles. By December, Wolfe, Herman, and Meisner had sent a shipment of stolen documents, 20 inches thick, to Duke Snyder. Snyder, in turn, sent notification to MO Building in Los Angeles. To Mo Budlong in Los Angeles. By the end of December, Wolfe was stealing documents from the IRS's chief counsel's office. Just days after Christmas, Wolfe broke into the office of Barbara Bird, an attorney in the IRS's refund litigation service. Bird had been present at the November 1st meeting. Instead of stealing files, Wolfe took them to a copier and made photocopies using government paper. Later, Wolfe met Meisner at a restaurant where he reported on his most recent theft. Meisner took the documents and underlined selections that he believed his superiors would find interesting or relevant and wrote a summary of the important points. This was then routed through the Assistant Guardian for D.C. and on to the Deputy Guardian for the U.S. The Deputy Guardian for Information in the U.S., the Branch 1 Director of the Information Bureau, and the Collections Officer, all of which were in Los Angeles. A copy was also sent to Mary Sue Hubbard. This was typically standard procedure for Meisner. In early 1975, Operation Snow White expanded again as Sharon Thomas found employment in the U.S. Coast Guard. Intelligence Agency and Nancy Douglas began work at the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. Douglas stole documents and made photocopies of others. These were transmitted to Herman. By spring, attention had been called back to the IRS case, as Mary Sue Hubbard had instructed Kember and Helt to use any method at our disposal to win the battle and gain our nonprofit tax status. Helt wrote back telling that her request had been sent to the Information Bureau, who had been ordered to complete the collection of documents from the IRS and the Department of Justice's tax files within 3 months. I'm going to interject here, you guys. Isn't it interesting how they still got the tax-exempt status? Just connect the dots. In April, Meisner procured a directory of the Department of Justice and located the offices that would have files pertaining to Scientology litigation. When he found what he wanted, he sent in Wolf, who broke into the offices of 2 attorneys on 3 successive Saturdays. Wolf copied 12 files and met up with Meisner, as before, at a restaurant. These files were especially useful to Scientology, as it detailed the government's strategy in various court cases. In May, Willardson directed Meisner to implement Project Horn, which called for Meisner to provide a cover for PR and legal for the way they obtained IRS docs. The idea would be for the GO's Public Relations Bureau to view the documents without worrying about being connected to the theft. Willardson's idea called for Meisner to steal documents dealing with organizations other than Scientology. Willardson also called for the theft of IRS stationery in order to forge letters from a fictional, disgruntled IRS employee. The files on various organizations, including Scientology, of course, would then be sent out attached to the fake letter. The idea was that it would appear that an upset IRS agent had himself sent the files to numerous organizations. There would be nothing to tie it to Scientology. Wolf stole both the stationery and, without permission, files on the Unification Church and Bob Jones University. During the summer and fall months of 1975, the GO launched an additional plan. In July, Meisner was told by Cindy Raymond that the Church of Scientology had initiated a Freedom of Information Act, FOIA lawsuit, against the IRS. Meisner was directed to add the office of Charles Zurovin to his list of offices to monitor. Zurovin was representing the government in the case. Isn't that intimidation? Meisner immediately passed this duty on to Wolf, who broke into Zurovin's office multiple times between July and November. Wolf revealed to his superiors that Zurovin was preparing an index of Scientology files relevant to the FOIA case. IRS offices from all over the country were sending files to Zurovin. This index file, required by the courts in all FOIA cases, is a total list of the documents requested and reasons for their exemption from the public, if any. By October, Zurovin had finished the index, numbering each document in order to simplify the location, and had provided a copy to Scientology attorneys. These attorneys, in turn, gave the index to Raymond, who passed it along to Meisner, who passed it to Wolf. Wolf then entered Zurovin's office and then began copying the documents listed on the index. Zurovin had essentially done the GO's job for them. On December 5th, 1975, Jane Kember issued Guardian Program Order 158, which intended to give L. Ron Hubbard early warning of impending legal action. The plan called the infiltration of the government agencies that had either the power to issue or the knowledge of impending subpoenas. Specific agencies include the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. and L.A., the IRS Office of International Operations, the DEA and the Coast Guard, and Immigration and Naturalization. After reviewing the letter, Meisner concluded it would be a better idea to infiltrate the Department of Justice than the Attorney's Office. In January 1976, Herman, the Southeast U.S. Secretary for the Information Bureau, informed Meisner that Helt and Weigard had approved a plan to send Don Alverzo to Washington. Alverzo arrived on the 17th, and on the 18th he picked the locks on the doors belonging to the office of Louis Hubbard, no relation to L. Ron Hubbard, and the file room housing Zuravin's files. Wolf stood guard at the end of the hallway while Alverzo worked on Hubbard's door. A few doors down, Meisner worked on Zuravin's door. After an hour and a half with no success, Meisner was getting upset. In frustration, Meisner hit the top of Zuravin's door, which popped right open. The three Scientologists entered the office and took the remaining Scientology-related documents. They then traveled to another floor where they made photocopies. Wolf continued to make copies while Alverzo and Meisner tried again to open Hubbard's office. The trio then worked well into the night photocopying files from Hubbard's office. When they left, sometime around 2 a.m., they left with a foot-tall stack of documents. Less than a month later, Richard Weigard wrote to Jane Kember telling her that the IRS documents that had been ordered to be produced in Guardian Order 1361 over 2 years earlier had been obtained. Gerald Wolf, along with Meisner, were later able to break into a room and make false IRS identification cards, which allowed them access to the federal courthouse in Washington. Wolf and Meisner then used these cards to gain access to restricted areas and steal more documents. While Wolf and Meisner continued their work at the IRS, Mary Sue Hubbard, along with other Guardian office members, were coming up with further plans. Guardian Program Order 302, written by Cindy Raymond and approved by Hubbard, amongst others, directed the infiltration of all government agencies that had withheld files from Scientology's various FOIA requests. On the night of April 14th, Meisner and Wolf were on the 10th floor of the IRS building, housing the Office of International Operations. Trying to enter an office, the pair found it locked. A passing cleaning lady noted Meisner and Wolf's suspicious behavior and notified a security guard. The guard confronted the pair and was presented with Wolf's genuine IRS card and Meisner's fabricated one. Satisfied, the guard had the cleaning lady open the door. Inside, the pair grabbed a hefty load of files. Unable to find a photocopier, the pair then took the files to the main IRS building, where the pair again used their identification to gain access. After copying the files, they returned them to Crate's office. The entire process took some 4 hours. In May, Wolf broke into the United States courthouse and stole keys to the office of Assistant United States Attorney Nathan Dodell. Wolf then took these keys to have them duplicated. and returned them unnoticed. Almost 3 weeks later, Wolf and Meisner broke into Dodell's office, stealing documents and, as usual, forwarding them to Guardian headquarters in Los Angeles. LAPD, did you hear that? The GO's interest in Nathan Dodell stemmed from a Scientology FOIA case. In April, Judge George L. Hart asked Dodell whether the U.S. had considered taking a deposition of L. Ron Hubbard. Dodell responded that it was an interesting thought. Furthermore, he promised to discuss it with the Department of Justice. In May, Meisner and Wolf entered the U.S. courthouse for the District of Columbia around 4 in the afternoon. They went to the third floor, which was the home of both the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Bar Association Library. They planned to locate Nathan Dodell's office, which was in the back of the Civil Division area, near an elevator. They then searched for the building's photocopiers. After mapping out these locations, they left. Later, Wolf and Meisner made a copy of Dodell's keys. On May 21st, Meisner and Wolf entered the courthouse, signing in to do research in the library, and were issued an elevator key. After riding the elevator to the floor of the library, the pair entered the library and removed several books from shelves and sat at a table. After a few minutes, they exited through a back door and emerged in a hallway. In this hallway was Dodell's office, which they entered using their keys. The duo stole a number of documents related to Scientology and walked through the hallway to the 2 copy machines they had previously located. The pair photocopied some 6 inches of documents before returning the originals to Dodell's office. 1 week later, Wolf and Meisner again met outside the IRS building. The duo then walked to the U.S. courthouse and signed in under fake names. They repeated their actions from the previous week, copying another group of documents from the District of Columbia Police Department, as well as the Food and Drug Administration. Returning to Dodell's office through the library, they were stopped by the night librarian, who asked if they had signed in. While they had signed in at the front desk, they had failed to do the same at the front desk of the library. When they announced that they had not, Johnson, the night librarian, told the pair not to come back unless they had specific authorization from the day librarian. The pair promptly left. 3 days later, Johnson notified the U.S. Attorney's Office that 2 individuals had been seen using the photocopying machines of the Attorney's Office. Johnson and the night guard were told to immediately contact the FBI if the individuals returned. Less than 2 weeks later, Herman phoned Meisner and ordered him to return to Dodell's office and steal his personal files. The goal was to formulate a plan that would result in Dodell being removed from his position as an assistant U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. Meisner and Wolf entered the United States Courthouse on June 11th, around 7 in the evening. They signed in as they did before and headed to the library. Johnson, the night librarian, recognized the pair and immediately stopped them. Meisner was prepared for this and showed the man a letter from the head librarian. Wolf and Meisner continued to the back of the library, where they exited into the hallway. Outside Dodell's office, the two saw the cleaning ladies were still at work. While Meisner and Wolf waited for the cleaning crew to vacate the office, Johnson called the FBI, which sent 2 agents over immediately. The 2 agents confronted the Scientologists and demanded to see their identification. Wolf used his real identification. Meisner presented his fake card and told the agents that he had recently resigned from the IRS. Meisner told Hansen that the pair was in the library to do legal research and that they had used the photocopiers to copy books and cases. Neither mentioned Scientology. After roughly 20 minutes of questioning, the FBI agents allowed them to leave. Meisner then phoned Herman to inform him of the news and was told to immediately fly to Los Angeles. Who gave that order? Inquiring minds want to know. Aftermath and trial. Meisner and Wolf were given cover stories by the Guardian's office. On the last day of June, Gerald Wolf was arrested. Wolf was charged with the use and possession of a forged official pass to the United States. The day after Wolf's arrest, Mary Sue Hubbard wrote a letter to Weingard, ordering him to keep her abreast of the situation. Hubbard also conversed with Mo Budlong and Richard Weingard about Wolf's arrest, cover story, and subsequent plan to destroy evidence linking Wolf and Meisner to Scientology. At the end of July, a judge decided that the case against Wolf warranted an investigation by a grand jury. A week later, the judge issued an arrest warrant for Meisner, who at the time was being hidden in L.A. LAPD, did you hear that? He was being hidden in L.A. The FBI was able to connect him to Scientology. By January 1977, it was becoming increasingly likely that Scientology would be unable to escape Operation Snow White without serious penalty. Though Meisner was still in hiding, he was growing increasingly anxious about the situation. By April, Meisner wanted to surrender to the authorities. Meisner was quickly put under the control of several guards. On May 13th, Gerald Wolf entered a guilty plea. Later in the month, Meisner escaped his captors, only to be convinced to rejoin the GO the following day. How's that for mind control? In June, Wolf, after being sentenced to probation and community service. Think about this, you guys. Think about all the crimes that were committed and what he got. Probation and community service. You guys just need to go down that rabbit hole. Wolf told the latest incarnation of his cover story. Several days later, Meisner would again escape his captors, though this time he would contact the FBI. Meisner was eventually taken to Washington, where he agreed to plead guilty to a 5-year conspiracy felony and cooperate with the grand jury. On July 8th, the FBI raided Church of Scientology, probably the last time too. Locations in Los Angeles, Hollywood, and Washington, D.C. The Los Angeles raid involved 156 FBI agents. 156 is the Jesuit number. Just go look at Zach K. Hubbard. The most that had ever been used in a single raid. It lasted 21 hours and filled a 16-ton truck with documents and other items. Too bad they didn't care about children just as much, right? The raids turned up documentation of not only the group's illegal activities against the United States government, but also illegal activities carried out against other perceived enemies of Scientology. These included Operation Freakout, that's with Paulette Cooper, a conspiracy to frame author Paulette Cooper on false BOMB threat charges, and conspiracy to frame, conspiracies to frame Gabe Cazares, mayor of Clearwater, Florida, on false hit-and-run charges. The papers also revealed that Sir John Foster, author of the official UK government inquiry into Scientology, and Lord Balliol, who had requested the report, were targets along with the National Association for Mental Health and World Federation for Mental Health. Comparing the FBI to the Gestapo, the church declared that all the files seized from the church were taken illegally. One does wonder what they did with the files, don't they? Though the FBI produced a 40-plus page affidavit detailing 160 specific items they were looking for. By July 20th, 13 days after the raid, a Washington judge ruled that the documents should be returned. Oh, isn't that nice, you guys? At least temporarily, to the church, and that none of the documents could be shared with branches of the government, unless that specific branch was investigating Scientology. Scientology's lawyers had successfully argued that in order to prepare for an August 8th hearing on the legality of the raid, they must be able to see the documents. By July 27th, a judge in Washington had ruled the warrant authorizing the raid was too broad, and as such, violated the church's Fourth Amendment rights. In August, this ruling would be overturned, with Scientology promising to take the case to the Supreme Court. Unreal. It's unreal. Which would, early in the next year, refuse to hear the case. Good. I mean, like the audacity. Oh my God. In August 1978, 11 high-ranking members of Scientology, I'd like their names, were indicted on 28 charges. One of the indicted was Mary Sue Hubbard. Yeah, all the stories tell us that. Wife of Scientology's creator, L. Ron Hubbard. So they say. The other 10 were Gerald Wolfe, Cindy Raymond, Henning Helt, Duke Snyder, Gregory Willardson, Richard Weingard, Mitchell Herman, Sharon Thomas, Jane Kember, and Mo Budlong. Kendrick Moxon. Can you believe this? You can't make it up, guys. You can't. And L. Ron Hubbard were named unindicted co-conspirators. But yet Kendrick Moxon is still practicing law. I mean, you guys, it's unbelievable. Over the course of the investigation, the Church of Scientology attempted to have a judge removed. Yeah, that's one of their old modus operandi. And subpoenaed almost 150 federal agents. I don't even know how they can do that, to be honest. I thought if you're some type of federal employee, I thought there was some type of protections you had. Something ain't right in Oz. In what appeared to be a large stalling scheme, the church also offered several shifting explanations for their actions. Ultimately, these tactics failed, and the defendants agreed to a plea deal. 7 of the 11 members of the Guardian's office pleaded guilty to just a single count of conspiracy to obstruct justice. 1 more pleaded guilty to a similar charge, and a 9th pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor. The Scientologists were allowed to argue for the suppression of government's evidence. The remaining 2 Scientologists were in England pending extradition. On December 6, 1969, some 5 years after Operation Snow White began, it officially came to an end. 5 of the Scientologists were sentenced to 4 years in jail, with 4 of the convicted being taken immediately. You guys, I'm not a rocket scientist, but isn't that like like a little slap in the hand for all they did? Trying to take over the government? It ain't adding up, you guys. It ain't adding up. With 4 of the convicted being taken immediately, Mary Sue Hubbard, wife of L. Ron Hubbard, was sentenced to 5 years. I wonder if she really served. At this point, I really do wonder. Each of the 6 faced a fine of $10,000. That was a lot of money then. The next day, the 4 remaining Scientologists were sentenced. 3 of the 4 faced a fine of $10,000 and 5 years in jail, which Scientology could pay easily if they did. I don't know. 3 of the 4 faced a fine of $10,000 and 5 years in jail. The 4th was fined $1,000 and sent to jail for 6 months. Upon release, Mary Sue Hubbard was given 5 years of probation and community service. Try to overthrow a government, You try to overthrow a government, it's just, here's some probation already. All of the Scientologists immediately appealed, but the verdicts were confirmed. In November 1980, the 2 remaining Scientologists, Jane Kember and Mo Budlong, were finally convicted on 9 counts of aiding and abetting burglary in connection with break-ins at government offices, and were sentenced to 6 years. Kember and Budlong had claimed political asylum in the UK, arguing that they should not be extradited to the U.S. because the burglaries had political objectives. Their application against extradition was denied by the British High Court on the grounds that it did not fall within the political offense exception to the Extradition Act 1870. Mr. Justice Griffiths said, "I am unable to accept that organizing burglaries, either for the purpose of identifying persons in government offices hostile to the Scientologists, or for the purpose of gaining an advantage in litigation, or even for the wider purpose of refuting false allegations, thus enabling a better image of the Church of Scientology to be projected to the public, comes anywhere near being an offense of a political character within the meaning of the Extradition Act. The applicants did not order these burglaries to take place in order to challenge the political control of or government of the United States. They did so to further the interest of the Church of Scientology and its members, and in particular, the interest of Ron L. Hubbard." I think that's backwards. "The founder of Scientology. In my view, it would be ridiculous to regard the applicants as political refugees seeking asylum in this country, and I reject the submission that these were offenses of a political character." Mary Sue Hubbard, Cindy Raymond, Gerald Bennett Wolfe, Henning Hilt, Duke Snyder, Gregory Willardson, Richard Wygard, Mitchell Herman, Sharon Thomas, Jane Kember, and Mo Budlong, all high-ranking Scientologists, were convicted. Prison sentences were as long as 6 years. Though no defendant served that amount. There we go. Of course they didn't. L. Ron Hubbard was named by federal prosecutors as an unindicted co-conspirator and went into hiding for the rest of his life. Okay, I just got to add. Come on, you guys, really? Come on. You're telling me that the Department of Justice or the FBI were unable to find L. Ron Hubbard? I mean, it's just ludicrous. I do have to wonder if a lot of this goes back to that whole Aleister Crowley connection. And I saw a picture of Hubbard as a Freemason. I forget where I saw it. Man, I wished I would have kept it. But, I mean, it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, after all of that, they have the audacity to tell us that L. Ron Hubbard lived the rest of his life in hiding. Are you serious, bro? You're trying to tell me there was no way to arrest him or to stop this whole entire thing? That's it. Okay, the effect of the scandal. The church has been reluctant to discuss the operation's details. Typical statements by members and operatives are often vague, comments saying that the Guardian's office had been infiltrated and set up to fail in its mission to protect the church, that those involved were purged from the church, without detailing what actually happened. Although it has been suggested many of those involved and purged remained in important positions of power within the church. Of course they did. All this fake justice, you know. Church spokespersons on the internet and elsewhere have been known to claim that the operatives had done nothing more serious than steal photocopier paper. Unreal. Operation Snow White extended to Canada and resulted in legal proceedings against the church. So that's it, you guys. I hope you guys enjoy the reading. I will leave the link in the description box. Like and subscribe if you choose. Have a good day or a good night wherever you are. Peace.